Alrighty guys, welcome. This is a hopefully short video about some advanced land nav techniques in response to some questions a friend had. So do note that before we get into this is a video that is for people who have a basic understanding of land nav already. This is not for people who do not know how to plot points or do not understand how to get an azimuth, anything like that, right? So if you don't know that, go out, learn that, practice it, figure that out. It's not trying to insult you guys, but you need to know how to do this before we're going to get into this advanced stuff that we'll talk about today. Apologize for any noises in the background for my dog. He's just out running around. Like I said, just trying to make this video quick. So, okay, first thing we're going to talk about are some catching features, because the main point of this video is how to build a route for actual tactical movement, not just army style land nav where you're doing straight up dead reckoning, following your compass directly to a point. So as part of this route log, we're going to need to understand catching features. So the catching features we'll talk about: left and right limits, handrails, checkpoints, attack points, and backstops. We're going to look at all those different things on this map right here. So to begin with, we'll go ahead and talk about our left and right limits. We will use this area of the map located right down here. Zoom in on that real quick as our example. So left and right limits and handrails kind of go hand in hand. So if I were going to be moving from this intersection right here, West Agnew Road and Northwest 84th Street, and I were trying to get to the St. Joseph Cemetery, then I could use West Agnew Road, keeping it on my right-hand side, and that would be both a right limit and a handrail. Now, tactically, I'm not going to want to walk right down the middle of that road, so if I just keep it on my right side, I can move quickly along it without having to be on it, right? So that anybody on that road could see me. Also acts as a right limit, so that way I know every time I bump into that road, I should not go any farther to my right or to the north, right? Now, something else that you can use as a left or right limit, you can use changes in elevation. You obviously have to know what you're doing in order to do that. You can use hydrography, water features. Just try to make sure that it's something that is not going to change based off of the map that you have, right? If it's an unimproved trail or it's a seasonal trail, probably not a good idea to have that as your left and right limit, because it may be washed out, it may have disappeared. Okay, moving on, let's go ahead and talk about our checkpoints. Once again, these should be tied to things that are easily identifiable. So we're gonna come over here to this intersection, Northwest 98th and West Agnew Road. And if we were, once again, trying to get to St. Joseph Cemetery, we could start at this intersection. We could use this draw or creek, depending on what time of year it is, how much water we've had. We could use that as a checkpoint, but either way, we're gonna see something there. So we're gonna know, okay, when I hit that, that's my checkpoint. Figure out in your route plan how far it is to that. And once you hit it, okay, boom, I've hit one in-route checkpoint. I could then use this area of high elevation along this ridge line as another checkpoint. Once I get to high elevation and I've been handrailing our road right here, then I know, boom, I'm at checkpoint 2. I can also use this as my attack point, right? So an attack point is something that is less than 500 meters away from your final point, is easily identifiable, and from that point, you are going to move on an extremely exact azimuth for an extremely exact distance so that I can hit whatever it is I'm trying to hit right on the nose. It needs to be less than 500 meters. I prefer somewhere around 100 or 200 meters tops, but you're not always going to get that lucky. Once again, this should be easily identifiable, so if you need to come back to it because you didn't find what you were trying to find, then you can shoot again from there, redo your math, redo whatever, and to try and hit your point you're getting to exactly on the nose. Last, let's go ahead and talk about backstops. So once again, as with all of these, very identifiable. This all ties into terrain association types of land nav. You use some dead reckoning with that attack point, but for the most part, you're terrain associating because this is identifiable stuff, right? So for my backstops, something like a road would be excellent. So if I were moving west to east, then I could use this road as a backstop, especially if I'm unfamiliar with the terrain, not super familiar with land navigation. Always underestimate your skill, right? Assume that you know less than you do and that you are not as good at this as you are, because that way when you're tired, hungry, cold, wet, you will still do the right things, right? If you are more capable with your land nav, you can use more minor terrain features in order to use those as your backstop, right? So for example, I could use this saddle right here as a backstop. I know that if I'm generally going uphill and then I keep going downhill and suddenly end up going uphill again, I'm in the wrong spot, right? But in order to do that, you would have to do something like counting your terrain features. So I cross a spur right here, right as I start my route. Then I cross a draw, cross another spur. And this is where this gets tricky, right? Is because we have a spur coming down here, spur coming down here. This might look like a draw on the ground. On the map, it doesn't, but it might on the ground, right? So you have to be very precise in how you're doing these things. Sometimes it's better to have less checkpoints than more. If you have too many, you're not going to be able to keep track of them. But once again, identifiable features used for all of these catching features. And if you're not super confident that you're going to be able to identify a saddle or a draw on the ground, that's cool. That's what you have this big backstop for. The closer it can be to your point, the better, because then you'll have less distance to go if you have to backtrack, but just make sure that it'll actually work for you. That's the most important thing. All right, so we'll zoom back out real quick and we'll go over our route plan, route log. So I will zoom back in real quick. These are the things that we should have for every step of our route log. If you're used to doing Army Land Nav where it's simple and you're moving maybe a few hundred meters at a time, then this probably looks like too much information. But in reality, if you're doing tactical land navigation, where you have a bunch of stuff going on, you're tired, hungry, cold, wet, and you need to get to the right spot, that's where all of this comes into play, because this keeps you from having to think. You can just look at it, remember what it is that you're supposed to be doing, and then follow that, instead of having to redo, how far was I supposed to go? Was I supposed to do this? What was this supposed to look like? I don't remember any of that. This takes the guesswork out of it. So you say where you're going from and to. You have your distance from that start point to wherever it is you're going. You have your azimuth in both grid and magnetic. Now it's important that you label these G for grid and mag for magnetic, because otherwise when you're cold, tired, wet, hungry, you're going to confuse meters, the M at the end of that distance, with the M for your magnetic azimuth, and then you are going to end up lost. Trust me, this has happened to almost every person I know who has done some sort of accurate route log. So always make sure you label this mag, not just M. Mag for magnetic. I will then have a left limit on my route, a right limit on my route, and a backstop on my route. These all help to keep me on track while I'm moving along this route. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the route that I have written down here. So we're going to start from our start point to checkpoint 1, located right up here. So we're moving for a distance of 275 meters. Our azimuth, we have a grid of 0, very convenient, and we've converted to magnetic 2 degrees. For my left limit, as I was talking about, I have this creek over here. So I know if I'm ending up in water, I've gone too far left, more than likely. You should be checking your compass as you're doing this. This is just to help keep you on track. And to my right, I know that I should have this draw, which moves high ground in the west, low ground in the east, and I've annotated that in my notes. For my backstop, there's not really anything good for me to look at here and quickly reference. So I'm going to use Wagon Tongue Creek up here to the north as my backstop. which is convenient. Basically, I know at any point in this route, if I've hit water, then I'm in the wrong spot. So I'm going to then pull out my compass and check it and figure out where I am. That's a fairly simple leg of this route. Short distance, 275 meters. Super simple azimuth and clear backstops, right? Same thing is going to apply for my next one. I'm basically just avoiding water or draws. If I fall into any of those, then I know I'm in trouble, because this route from checkpoint 1 to checkpoint 2 is all high ground. So I'm going to use that as my highway to funnel me right into checkpoint 2, which is located right in this little tiny baby saddle in between this little hilltop and this spur right here. Boom. Simple movement there. The next one that we want to draw attention to is my checkpoint 2 to checkpoint 3, right? So this is a long movement, 975, almost a full kilometer, right? And that's a fairly long movement. We've got a little bit of terrain in here that we're going to use to our advantage. But let's get into it, right? So we have a distance 975, azimuth, our grid 101, converted to 103 magnetic. And then we're going to take a look at our left and right limits and our backstop. So for our left limit is Wagon Tongue Creek, right? But I know that if I start going downhill and I'm trending downhill into water, I'm in trouble. That should not be happening, right? Same on the left and on the right. So for left limit, Wagon Tongue Creek. For my right limit, I know that I have this South Creek that runs along that draw. As the draw gets deeper, it's more likely to have water in it. So for this leg of my route, it's probably going to have water if I start running into it. And for my backstop, it's along where the checkpoint is, checkpoint 3 on Northwest 98th Street, which is convenient because I know that if I end up on the north or south end of my point, I just have to walk to the high ground there and I'm at my point. Super easy to catch myself and fix it if I wasn't quite dead on. Now the important point about this leg of the route, go ahead and zoom in on real quick, is this piece where I have my in-route checkpoints. So zoom back, I have an in-route checkpoint at this hilltop as I would cross it on azimuth, and then that way I can know that I am on the right track. I'm using the high ground to my advantage. I'm not getting sucked down into any of this low ground that's going to be thick with vegetation and hard to pass, right? I'm staying on the high ground and I'm using these hilltops as in-route checkpoints to keep me on track. So I know if I'm following that azimuth, I can check my compass every so often and I should cross a hilltop at 325. If I don't cross a hilltop at 325, I know that I need to get back on track and I should cross a hilltop at 625. Boom. Once again, if I don't hit those dead on, then I can move north or south in order to try and find them. Once I find them, then I know that I'm back on track. This is sort of similar to the method some of you guys may be familiar with, where you are using your lensatic compass to shoot to something like a tree or a rock or whatever. This is just a bigger version of that. But instead of sitting there looking at your compass the whole time with zero tactical awareness, zero wherewithal, you can move slowly, deliberately, paying attention to your environment and using these to keep you on track, right? Make sure you write those down because otherwise, I promise you're gonna forget them when you are cold, wet, tired, hungry, all that good stuff that happens when you're doing tactical operations. Okay, so this point is conveniently located on top of the hill and where that crosses this road. Now I did that on purpose, right? This makes a good checkpoint. If I had put a checkpoint somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, then I would have a hard time finding it, right? If it's just randomly on the side of one of these spurs, yeah, you may be able to hit it right where you want to, but there's a pretty good chance that you're not going to. Tie them to identifiable terrain features. For something like this, if you're working tactically, you could offset it just a little bit, but I know when I can see that point, okay, when I cross the road right there, that's where I'm going to have my checkpoint. So from there, I am once again back on track in order to move to my final point. Okay, so the final leg of this movement, we have checkpoint 3 to point 1. Not a super far movement again, right? Distance of 325, azimuth, grid 35, converter to magnetic of 37. For my left limit, once I have crossed this road running north to south now becomes my left limit. If I run into that, I know that I have strayed too far to the left. And to my right, I have downhill elevation. Once again, this can be dangerous. Be careful in selecting your left-right limits, backstops, all of that, because I know enough that if I was in this area, I would be okay having that as a right limit. I know that I would understand when I'm moving away from where I'm supposed to. If you have not done a ton of land nav, don't do that. Stick to things like roads, like major water features, things like that. For my backstop, I have Wildwood Lake back here. You could also use something like this little cliff right here. We'll zoom in on that. This little cliff right here where my contour lines come together very closely. That would definitely tell you that you've gone too far, but we'd probably be able to see the water by then, and we'd know that we'd overshot it, right? Okay, so then continuing on that, right? I have my left-right backstop. The next important thing is going to be my attack point, right? My attack point is located in the middle of this hilltop right here. It's at 175 meters from checkpoint 3, so I know once I have moved 175 meters, I should hit a hilltop right here. I'm going to center myself up as well as I can in that hilltop, because from here, I very precisely measured my azimuth and my distance 2.1, right? The rest of these checkpoints can be generalized, right? You want to hit them as precisely as possible, but these are just to keep me on track while I'm conducting this movement to get over here. These don't have to be super, super precise. Point 1, on the other hand, needs to be plotted as precisely as possible so that I can hit it directly. My attack point needs to be plotted as precisely as possible so I can hit it directly and use it to get to point 1. So looking at this, I have my attack point 175 meters from checkpoint 3. So when I've walked that 175, I'm either going to find the center of that hilltop, or I should already be there if I've done everything correctly. And then I have 150 meters from that attack point, 2.1. So I will walk precisely 150 meters on that 37-degree azimuth, and that should put me right on top of point 1. Now, taking a look at this route, it's probably a little bit more complicated than some of you would think you need to do. You'd say, why wouldn't I just shoot an azimuth straight from the SP 2.1? Because if I'm doing that, that would be approximately, hold my beer, 1 kilometer, about 1,800 meters, right? And if I add all these up, I apologize, I should have done this math before I started, then I'm looking at about 2.3 clicks. So I've added 500 meters on my movement. You're like, man, that seems like a lot. Well, instead of taking all of this low ground where I'm going to be fighting through a draw and having a terrible time trying to go as low as I can, go through water, go through vines, go through who knows what else is in here, and then climb all the way up to point 1, I've instead used this high ground as more or less a super highway to not only keep me on track, but also to help me move quicker, because I'm only moving, these contour intervals are 10 feet, I'm only moving up or down about 20 to 30 feet of elevation at a time, right? Versus this, which would be hundreds of feet of elevation loss and gain, and that's gonna tear up your body. So, hope you guys enjoyed this. This was just designed to be, like I said, quick and informative for an advanced land nav video. Sorry it ran 20 minutes, but if you guys have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to answer them as much as I can. So, thanks for watching.